How's it going, everyone? This is Brandon Bias from tutorialcheck.com, and welcome to another Photoshop tutorial. In this week's tutorial, I'm going to show you guys an effect/art style that I came across pretty recently, but I've grown to be pretty fond of. This is an effect called a polyscape. A polyscape is basically where you take 1, 2, maybe 3 different photos of different landscapes or just, things of that nature, and you combine them together using very simple geometric shapes. So let me show you an example of what we'll be creating for today. And as you can see here, it might take a moment for everything to kind of sink in, but all this is 2 different photos of different mountain peaks, and they're combined together with these simple shapes. So we got like a diamond that's kind of cut off at little different segments here, and we have a border that looks like it's kind of being overlapped by certain portions of the diamond, and then I threw in a couple little bubbles here and there just for the fun of it. But anyway, it's a pretty simple effect overall, but it might take a little bit of time to do. We've got a decent number of layers to create this overall effect, but in the end, guys, if you enjoy the tutorial, please give it a thumbs up, give it a like, and also feel free to leave a comment, and you never know, maybe you'll end up in our favorite comments in the next video. Speaking of which, make sure you remember to stick around for the end of the video to check out our favorite comments. So, what do you say we get to the chase here? Obviously, the first thing we are going to need in order to make this work are a couple of photos. So if you want to do the same thing that I did, you can head over to freeimages.com, type in mountain peak, and the 2 photos that I used are this photo of Mount Rainier, and then there's another one down here with a mountain by some lake. Doesn't really say specifically here. So assuming that you have a account, you can see that I'm signed in up top. Just kind of give the photo a click, and it will show the full scale version of it. And I'll also bring up the full scale version of the lakeside mountain that supposedly doesn't have a name. And I'm just going to grab Mount Rainier here, and we'll right click and copy the image. And let's go back to Photoshop here. We don't need this anymore. So let's go to File and choose New. And you can either stick with the dimensions of the original photo, which in this case is 3008 by 2000. But if you want to use this as a wallpaper that is specifically for your particular computer, you can choose those dimensions. Mine are 1920 by 1080. And I'm just going to choose that with a transparent background. And we'll click OK. So all we have to do is hit Control or Command V to paste this particular photo into our document here. And I'm going to go to the right hand side and rename this as Mount Rainier. And I'm also going to right click and convert this to a smart object. So that way I can scale this up and down without too much of a loss in quality. And the first thing I want to do with this particular photo is center it on the canvas. So to do that, let's hit Control or Command A to select the canvas. And make sure you're on the Move tool, which you can do by hitting the letter V. And up top here, you'll see we've got these 5 different combinations of boxes and lines. We'll choose the second one to center it vertically. And we'll choose the 5th one to center it horizontally. And that will get it nice and center on our canvas here. So let's hit Control or Command D to deselect. And I'm going to scroll to zoom out a little bit. By the way, if you don't know how to scroll to zoom, just hit Control or Command K, and you can toggle zoom with scroll wheel. I find it pretty handy. So anyway, let's hit Control or Command T to bring up the transform options for Mount Rainier. And let's click and drag one of these corners while holding Alt and Shift. And we'll just scale this down until the bounding box is just outside of the size of the canvas. So let's hit the check mark to commit the transformation, and then we can hit Control 0 to zoom into canvas size here. And now let's go back and copy this lakeside photo here, and we'll bring that in. And once again, let's rename this as Lakeside Mountain. Right click it, convert it to smart objects. Control A, center it vertically and horizontally, and we'll scale this down, but we're probably going to change the scale of this later, so it doesn't really matter what size you make this for the time being. So anyway, let's go ahead and turn off the lakeside mountain for the time being, and we want to create the shapes that are going to represent, you know, where the lakeside mountain is going to be showing. So, seeing as I want these shapes to be centered on the document, I need to make some guides to help me know where the center of the document is. So an easy way to do that is to go to View, choose New Guide, and do 50% on the horizontal, and then we'll do View, New Guide, and then we'll do 50% on the vertical, and we'll click OK. So now we should have this bit of a crosshair that is smack dab in the middle of our document here. So let's make a new layer above Mount Rainier, and make sure you have the rectangle tool, and let's go ahead and make this this black, and simply click and drag from that crosshair while holding Alt and Shift, and let's just make it about yay big. Shouldn't matter too much. And then let's hold down the Alt key or the Option key if you're on a Mac, and click and drag another box, and again hold down the Shift key, and make sure you give it a little bit of breathing room from the original rectangle. And when you let go, that should subtract from the other shape to give you a kind of a thick border, like so. Alright, so we want to rotate this to make it look like a diamond. So to do that, go to the left-hand side and swap to the Path Selection tool, or you can hit the letter A. And with the Path Selection tool, click and drag to make a selection around both of the boxes here, so that way you can have them both selected. And we'll hit Control or Command T to bring up the Transform tool, and click and drag around the outside of the bounding box while holding the Shift key until you have this nice little diamond shape. And we can hit the little check mark up here, click Yes, and there we go, we have a nice diamond. And let's go to the left-hand side and swap to the Ellipse tool, and this time we'll hold down the Shift key, so that way we can add this shape to our existing rectangle, and just click and drag until you have something around yay big. It doesn't particularly matter what size you make it. So these guides are a little bit in the way for the time being, so let's just hit Control semicolon or Command semicolon to hide those right now. And now we can go back to the lakeside mountain, turn that on, and we want this to be clipped to the rectangle, or let's rename this as our polygon, below it. So there are two ways we can do this. One, we can just right-click Lakeside Mountain and choose Create Clipping Mask, and now we'll just be inside the bounds of that shape below it. Another way that you can do that is to put your mouse between the two layers, and if you hold down the Alt key, you should notice that it changes to like a box with a downward pointing arrow. You can give that a click instead, and that way it will also create a clipping mask. Nice and easy. So let's go ahead and bring up the Transform tool, and let's kind of mess with the size and the position of it. And let's kind of scale it down, maybe move it back up a little bit. So I like to have it to where you can see the peak of the mountain inside of the circle here. And we also have a nice little bit of a contrast between the sky and the lake below it. So we kind of have like a blue to brown to blue, and I think it's kind of cool. So anyway, let's commit that. And now we want to create those gaps that we saw inside of the diamond. So we'll create another new layer. Let's bring back the guides with Control or Command semicolon. And let's go and grab our rectangle tool. Click and drag while holding, and then hold Alt and Shift here. And this time we'll make it slightly smaller than this inner point of the diamond. And so we can see how that looks there. And then once again, we'll hold down the Alt key, click and drag. Now we'll hold Shift, and let's just make it about yay big. Somewhere right there looks pretty good. And like before, we'll swap to the Path Selection tool and click and drag a selection around both of the boxes, so that way they're both selected. And now we want to, actually before we make this into a selection, go to the polygon layer and add a layer mask to it. So you can click the add a layer mask icon down at the bottom of the layers panel, and that'll create this this blank white box on our polygon layer, and we'll come back to that in just a second. So anyway, go back to Rectangle 1, make sure you use your path selection tool to select both the outside and the inside shape here. And now we'll go to the thumbnail of Rectangle 1, so where you can kind of see the shape here, and hold down the Control key or the Command key if you're on a Mac, and give that sucker a click, and that will create a selection around the box. Alright, and now let's go ahead and turn that off for the time being, and we'll go to the polygon layer, so we have the masks for that selected, and now we'll swap to our brush tool, which you can do by hitting the letter B. And in this case, we can right click somewhere and size down the brush. Let's put it somewhere around 100 pixels or so, and just click one of these round brushes in here. It shouldn't matter too much. And also make sure you have your foreground color set to black. And now what we can do is we can zoom in, and if you paint black on this layer mask, it should erase or hide that particular portion of the diamond. And so we'll just do that right there on this bottom right hand portion of that right hand point. And let's create that sort of alternating feeling. So we'll keep that masked away, keep this here, mask this portion away, keep that, and mask that away. We'll keep this here, and then we'll mask this away. Okay, so that way we'll create this sort of this alternating gap between some of these points of the diamond, and that's kind of just a, I don't know, it's just for fun and for a little bit of an interesting twist to it. So anyway, let's hit Control or Command D to deselect here, and let's go back to Rectangle 1, and we'll turn that on. And once again, we'll go back to our path selection tool by hitting the letter A, and this time we'll just select the inner square on the inside here, and let's hit Control or Command T. And let's scale this up while holding Alt and Shift. And so all we have is kind of like a slight, really thin border going around our diamond. And this time we'll hit the check mark to commit that transformation here. Okay, so next what we'll do is add a layer mask to Rectangle 1. So let's click the layer mask icon, and we'll have a blank layer mask here. And then we'll turn off Rectangle 1, and let's also turn off Lakeside Mountain. And let's go select the polygon layer, and making sure that you have the path selection tool. Again, you can hit the letter A to swap to that. Click and drag to select the outside and the inside diamond shape. Make sure you do not have the circle selected. This is not what we want to do. And once again, we'll Control click or Command click the thumbnail for the polygon layer, and you should see that we have this selection kind of going around our diamond shape, those little marching ants. And let's turn on Lakeside Mountain, and let's turn on Rectangle 1, and select the layer mask for Rectangle 1, and once again swap to your brush tool by hitting the letter B. And so this time around we're going to do basically the same thing that we did with the diamond, but in reverse. So zoom in on one of these portions where the black bar overlaps the diamond, and simply paint it in black on the layer mask to hide it. And that will kind of create the illusion that this black border is actually kind of going underneath the diamond and then continuing its way around. So let's kind of do the same thing over here, and we'll do the same thing over there, and then one last time up here. Alright, so we can hit Control or Command D to deselect. Let's also hide those guides by hitting Control or Command semicolon. And we need something to kind of fill in this border here. So what we're going to do is go to Mount Rainier, duplicate it with Control or Command J, and bring that layer up top. And now we're going to hit Control or Command T, and then right click and flip it vertically. And let's commit that. And let's also turn this into a clipping mask above Rectangle 1. And so now we should have this this kind of, you know, inverted and contrasted feeling going on inside this little border here, which I think is kind of cool. Yeah, you can do whatever the heck you want there, but I think it works. So what do you say we start making this pop a little bit more and give it some fun colors and whatnot? So let's go to the mount rainier layer, and let's go to the adjustments panel. And if you don't have that, you can go to window and choose adjustments. Oops, I accidentally got rid of it. Window adjustments, and let's add a black and white adjustment layer. And for this, we'll toggle the tint, and we'll just choose a kind of like a dark, slightly gray blue color, and we'll click OK, and change the opacity to 60%. The purpose of this is to kind of give it an overall, like, slightly moody blue color. I don't know, I just think it's interesting. So let's go back and add a curves adjustment layer right above the black and white adjustment layer. And for this, we'll click and drag the black point slightly off to the right, and then we'll bring the white point slightly down, so something like that. And we'll bring the higher midpoint back up, and we'll bring the lower midtones slightly down. And we can just adjust this a little bit. It doesn't have to be quite so intense. And basically the effect that we're going for is to kind of dull out everything. We're making the lower section down here a little bit darker, and we're kind of curving off those super high brights that we had inside of the mountain snow right there. So we're basically just trying to mellow out all of the tones in the photo here, alright? So anyway, moving on, let's go to Mount Rainier Copy, and we're going to create a vignette right above it. So let's go to, let's see, it's Layer, we'll go to New Fill Layer, and we'll choose Gradient. And this is going to be our blue vignette. And for this, we're going to set the mode to Soft Light, and click OK. And let's click the gradient to edit it. And let's choose, for this first color, kind of like a dark bluish color, maybe a slightly gray. We'll click OK. And then the second color, we'll double click that and make it a slightly lighter version of that color. So we've got this slightly dark blue to a slightly lighter blue. Click OK. We'll change the style to radial with the angle at 60 degrees. And we'll change the scale to 150%, and we'll toggle the reverse. And if you turn that off and on, you see we got this kind of a cool little bluish vignette around the edge. But we want to make it a little bit more intense around the edge there. So let's create another gradient fill layer. This time will just be a regular vignette. And we'll set this mode to overlay. And we'll set that to radial 60, 150 with the reverse. Actually, let's put up the scale a little bit further to maybe around 170, 180, maybe 190. And let's click on the gradient. And this time around, all we're going to do is click and drag this top right-hand point, which represents the level of transparency. And we'll just bring this in until it's a little bit more mellow around the middle here. So I like putting it between 40 and 50% in this case. And we'll just click OK again. And you'll see that it just creates that much more intense vignette around the edge. So the two of these together create an effect that I think looks pretty nice. So let's just add a little bit of color on top of this. We'll go to our adjustments, create a curves adjustment layer, and let's swap over to the blue, and let's just bring up the blues a little bit. And then we'll go to the greens and lower the greens a little bit to add a slight little bit of a slight magenta feeling to it. So you should see everything become a little bit more blue and a little bit more magenta with that adjustment layer. Alright, so last but not least, let's create a couple of bubbles. Let's create a new layer. Let's make it our bubbles. And let's right click, make sure our brush has a hardness of 100%, and then you can use the right bracket key to scale up. Likewise, you can use the left bracket key to scale down, and just add a couple little random spots here and there. So I'll create a big one over there, and let's create one over there with a couple little brothers to go with it. Maybe we'll do like a like an edge of one over here. And we'll do another one right there, and maybe something down at the bottom there. And now what we're going to do is change the fill down to 0%, and we'll go to Effects. We'll choose the Color Overlay, and let's do one of these this kind of lightest blue colors here, and change the blend mode from normal to divide right here, and simply just lower down the opacity a little bit so it's a little more subtle. And I want these to be a little bit more of that bluish color, so if we just make it a little bit more gray, it'll make it a little more, it'll make it look more blue. So let's just kind of mess with that until it matches. There we go. So we can click OK, maybe lower that down a little bit so it's much more subtle. Alright, so just click OK, see how it looks, and if you like it, you can hit F twice and take a look at your masterpiece here. Alright, so there was a lot of little steps to create this effect, but I think it's worthwhile. It's not overly difficult so long as you're familiar with masking and clipping masks and stuff of that nature. Regardless of how skilled you are at Photoshop, I really hope you were able to make this work, and above all, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a like, leave a comment, and as always, be sure to stick around for our favorite comments at the end of the video. So that's all I have for you guys for today. I will see you next time. Peace out.
Under an open sky we find